He's 45 years of age, 79 convictions. And where the hell do you start with that?
Gordon Ramsay went behind bars, but it's not what you think. Because, well, here's the time Chef Ramsay turned criminals into chefs. For someone with a temper like Ramsay, do you ever think he's gotten into trouble with the law? Well, you can't deny that Chef Ramsay has a wild side to his personality. And every now and then, we've seen this trait flare up in different shows that he's featured in. Being a culinary genius, it's definitely hard to deal with some home cooks and budding chefs. But for someone who's as dynamic and spirited as Chef Ramsay, at the age of 56 years old, do you think his 20s were sober? Back in the day, Chef Ramsay was just as wild. Something happened in 1993. Apparently, like all of us at some point, Chef Ramsay was out drinking with his friends all night. In the early hours of the morning, he, along with his 3 other buddies, were messing around in the washrooms of a subway station. The station master reported them to the police, but luckily, they were let go after receiving a fair warning. Chef Ramsay said that he didn't really remember this incident. But his PR specialist reported that someone was peeping on them and that they were being obnoxious and unbearably noisy. Almost 3 decades after this incident, in December of 2011, Chef Ramsay went to jail. However, not as a criminal, but for a good cause. Before I get into why he even visited this place, let's talk about the famous chef's past. It might look like Chef Ramsay was forever blessed with fame and prestige. He's often seen at the world's best hotels, mingling with VIPs we can never dream of meeting. But was life always this merry for the Scottish chef?
And I saw a lot of shit growing up.
Well, Ramsay had a pretty strained relationship with his father, who wasn't necessarily too cordial with his family, especially Gordon's mom. He, along with his siblings, grew up seeing their father being very disrespectful and vicious towards their mother. During his early years, Chef Ramsay and his siblings were moved to a number of different homes and schools. This was mostly because they moved where their father worked, and since he often lost his job, they moved frequently. And constantly being on the move took a huge toll on all of them. Since Ramsay and his family were dealing with numerous things in their lives, his younger brother Ronnie got into using illicit substances. That's quite sad. Eventually, Ronnie was sent to a young offenders prison, and this came as a huge blow to the Ramsay family. His mother's devastated face when she came home after meeting his brother on his birthday at a prison got permanently etched into Chef Ramsay's mind. That's when Ramsay realized the human cost of being in prison. But there was something that frustrated him.
Taxpayer forks out 38 grand a year to keep each of Britain's prisoners banged up.
Chef Ramsay wanted to put these prisoners to work. He put forward a plan of setting up a business behind bars by getting the prisoners to cook from the inside to sell on the outside. And to put his plan into action, Chef Ramsay chose Britain's toughest prison, the Brixton Prison. If being among a bunch of lawbreakers wasn't challenging enough, Chef Ramsay had to accomplish his targets in the short span of 6 months. Do you think he would succeed in getting these unruly men who were jailed for their unlawful actions to work and eventually maybe even earn? While Chef Ramsay was seated in his car on his way to the prison, the anxiety he felt was almost palpable. He mentioned that in the last decade, the inmate population of Britain had gone up by 22,000 inmates. And guess how much that cost the country?
Cost almost 2 billion a year. It just seems a complete waste.
Well, this is exactly what inspired Chef Ramsay to take charge and do something about it. But it wasn't gonna be easy. It took 9 months for Chef Ramsay to pursue the Ministry of Justice to just let him try and set up his business in the prison. That's some crazy persistence. Ramsay was really serious about making a change. Finally, when all the permissions required were set in place and the news broke out in the prison, a few inmates were intrigued about Chef Ramsay's plan. It's not every day you have a celebrity walk into prison to teach you something, least of all cooking. But just because he had the permission, was Chef Ramsay truly free of any threats? Of course not. It's a place that houses dangerous people from drug dealers to murderers. Things could get really serious at any time. Ramsay knew that he had to be cautious while working on his plan. And could he really yell and berate the inmates like he would on Hell's Kitchen? I'm sure he thought 3 times before opening his mouth on the show. But why would Ramsay even take on this dangerous challenge? Well, this is what Chef Ramsay had to say.
The purpose of this is to get in there, set up a business, and to get them grafted.
Of the 800 inmates, 22 prisoners signed up for Chef Ramsay's plan. Did they really want to turn their lives around? Or was it just for some fun in their otherwise boring lives, being jailed 21 hours a day? The officers highly doubted that the prisoners participating had any good intentions. Because, don't forget, these men dealt with them every other day. The cops were certain that Chef Ramsay's plan would fail before it even started. But Chef Ramsay was hell-bent to have his way. Would the prisoners respond in kind?
I was scared of Mr. Ramsay!
Well, we're about to find out. Chef Ramsay first had to meet and greet with 22 interested prisoners. Soon after, he wanted to see if they knew anything about cooking at all. Ramsay doubted that the prisoners would know how to even cook up a simple dish like an egg. So would he be able to run a bakery with them? None of the prisoners had any hope. Mainly because something like this had never happened before, but Chef Ramsay was determined. However, were the prisoners ready to rock their aprons? There was only one way to find out, through a cooking test. Chef Ramsay, after a brief introduction, called 2 prisoners at a time to cook him some scrambled eggs. Anthony Kelly and another prisoner, whose face and name were not disclosed, were the first ones to go. 33-year-old Anthony was a career criminal who had spent half of his life in and out of prison. At the time of filming, Anthony was sentenced to 2.5 years for dangerous driving and burglary. So would this burglar be able to live up to Chef Ramsay's expectations? Well, this is how his eggs turned out.
Little taste. Disgusting, yeah.
Anthony was a bit too hard on himself because Ramsay said that he actually cooked a good omelet. Next was Lawrence Gibbons, who had 76 convictions to his name. Though this time around, he was sentenced to 1.5 years for robbing post offices and committing bodily harm. Would Lawrence do better than Anthony? Well, no, it was a total disaster.
Bit too watery, bit overcooked.
As the inmates showcased their cooking skills one by one, Chef Ramsay understood that he had to start from rock bottom. The bakery was now looking like a distant dream. Next up, it was time for an inmate who had spent more time in prison than outside, Tesfa Jones. This inmate himself said that he actually grew up in prison and was first jailed when he was barely 12 years old. Not surprisingly, Tesfa failed the test, but he was willing to work hard. Chef Ramsay had a real challenge ahead, with all 22 being useless in the kitchen. Ramsay then realized that none of them knew how to cook, but were they at least willing to learn? The following day, after a brief meeting with the prison governor, Chef Ramsay decided to scale down the prisoners from 22 to 12 for his project. And for this, he arranged another test to pick his final 12. When Chef Ramsay introduced the test, this is how the inmates reacted.
We're gonna make some fairy cakes.
Ramsay was a bit taken aback, but what was he even expecting? These were men who had committed dangerous crimes. But it was serious business for Chef Ramsay. Through the test, he wanted to see their imagination go wild. So he asked them to decorate the fairy cakes in any way they pleased, but with finesse. The inmates were divided into 2 groups. Half of them would bake the cakes, and the other half would sell them to the prison officers. This was gonna be a daunting task. The baking team was given a simple fairy cake recipe. As they began with the first step of mixing the ingredients together, the team had already started making mistakes.
Now, who would have thought? Throw that away.
The concentration power of the baking team was the worst. David Jones, an ex-soldier who had become an addict, resorted to robbery to fuel his addictions. He hadn't seen his family for over 20 years and was sick of failing. Would Chef Ramsay's bakery help him make his life meaningful? Well, that's exactly what he was trying to do. But would Ramsay be able to succeed? Lawrence showed a great deal of interest as well and seemed to care about what he was doing. He checked the cakes to see if they were cooked and even checked with Ramsay before going ahead with the next step. It's never too late to learn, is it? Of all the inmates, Lawrence appeared to know what he was doing. David, on the other hand, screwed up completely. Meanwhile, the marketing team was in full swing to get their work done. But they first needed to finalize a brand name. Needless to say, it was full of chaos.
I can't listen to 5 people at the same time, man.
While the marketing team argued over what they should call themselves, the baking team moved on to decorating the cupcakes. The first thing that catches your eye when it comes to cupcakes is the frosting. And the inmates' designs ranged from disastrous to delectable to even downright dodgy.
Should be sprinkled lightly. Now.
In the midst of finding a decent cupcake, Anthony impressed Chef Ramsay with his decor.
That's nice. Yeah, it's not too bad at all.
It's funny how he wanted to keep the cupcake to himself, but we can't let him do that now, can we? In the meantime, the marketing team went all glitter with their poster design as well. The team chose the name Convict Cupcakes, and it was designed by Tesfa. To promote the cupcakes and sell them, they put Chef Ramsay's name on the poster, which is a brilliant idea. But it's the tagline that got me. They came up with a tagline that read, "The real taste of prison," and I have to say, it's both catchy and a little bit unsettling. But these convicts were creative after all. However, would they be able to sell their cupcakes? The convicts' cupcake shop was set up outside the A-Wing, and they were sold by Anthony and Tesfa. The sale of the cupcakes were in full swing, and the prison officers seemed to enjoy buying them.
Yeah, can I have...
Have 3, one with strawberry, chocolate and vanilla.
Both Anthony and Tesfa were doing a great job behind the stand, and they also looked the part. Soon, the kitty box started to see more cash, but Chef Ramsay had to keep an eye on it like a hawk so the box didn't vanish. At the end of the day's sale, the prisoners made 49 quid, 20 of which was profit. Chef Ramsay told Anthony and Tesfa how he could turn that 40 quid into 4 grand a week, but for that, they would have to put in a lot of hard work. When Chef Ramsay asked Tesfa if he was ready for it, without any hesitation, he agreed to do whatever it took to set up the bakery. Man, with that determination, I don't doubt this man will succeed. Anyway, although Anthony rocked the marketing of the cake, Chef Ramsay had one good question for him. And Anthony's answer would definitely make you question Chef Ramsay's confidence.
Straight work?
Yeah.
Now that the cupcakes were sold, Chef Ramsay was now faced with a difficult decision. He had to choose his final 12. Ramsay found it hard to pick out names from a bunch of guys who had never worked hard before.
Because they're all the same. They've all got issues.
Who among these men did you think would be able to give 60 hours a week worth of committed time? Chef Ramsay was worried. The ones who showed commitment and stood out were the ones who had several convictions to their name. Take Lawrence, for example. He wanted to be a part of this 12-person brigade, but he had a history of showing no remorse or care for his victims. Tesfa, on the other hand, was jailed 7 times, and Anthony had never worked a day in his life. But Chef Ramsay was up for the challenge. He had his eye on the greater good that this bakery could bring to the prison and its inmates. He desperately tried to look for the passion and hunger in each of the prisoners and finally found the team that he wanted.
You're the final 12.
The inmates did seem excited, but there was something that they had to bear in mind. And Chef Ramsay made sure that they understood it loud and clear.
You're gonna learn, you're gonna earn, and you're gonna put back inside to this prison.
With that, the first day of teaching began, and the first thing that had to be changed was the prisoners' routine. The inmates always ate in their cell, and Chef Ramsay wanted to move them to the kitchen. And the very first problem he was faced with was resistance. Lawrence wasn't happy with the changes made. He wasn't ready to come out of his comfort zone, and for this reason, he didn't even want to be a part of Chef Ramsay's brigade. But just as he left, all hell broke loose.
Can I get a chance to explain what I'm saying? But you're just talking over me, bro.
Would Chef Ramsay be able to get these men to work as a team? Sounds impossible. But Ramsay devised a plan that could either make or break them. The plan was to put them under intense pressure, so he asked them to cook an entire meal for the prison. But for that, Chef Ramsay needed permission from Daryl Hatfield, who was in charge of the kitchen. He wanted to make his brigade cook chili corn carne for the 800 inmates. The head of the kitchen warned him against it, but Chef Ramsay was all in. But there was a little problem.
Prison specifications say that we provide a minimum of 5 choices.
5 choices every day.
Now, who saw that coming? That wasn't the only thing though. They would all have to be dished out at 4:15 p.m., which wasn't a lot of time. If there was any mix-up, or if the prisoners weren't happy with the dish, it could spark off a full-blown riot. Was Chef Ramsay up for the challenge? The next day, Chef Ramsay made his brigade wake up 2 hours earlier, and that was just a hell of a task. Ramsay also convinced Lawrence to join him back on the team. And then, the famous chef laid out the menu for the 5 main courses to be made. Chef Ramsay had quite the elaborate menu designed.
250 portions of a normal chili and 100 portions of a vegetarian bake.
He put Tesfa in charge of the veg prep and Lawrence in charge of the main dish. Meanwhile, Anthony was put in charge of the bakery station. The team was already off to a slow start, and on top of that, the vegetable prep team was fussing about cold water.
That's too cold.
However, amidst all the challenges, the bakery team was on fire, leaving Chef Ramsay impressed. The team eventually got every dish ready to serve, and Chef Ramsay finally knew that he got a team for his project. All the prisoners loved the food, and the day ended well. While Chef Ramsay thought everything was going on the right track, something serious happened.
Someone's been nicking onions, chilies, and garlic.
Back to their roots, huh? Stealing from the kitchen is a big no-no. It could lead to Chef Ramsay having his whole project shut down. Tesfa had to take some onions with him, but he promised that he wasn't stealing. He thought they were spares. On the other hand, another prisoner spoke about him taking some garlic. Anyway, Chef Ramsay was grateful that they accepted their faults. But he also explained that they couldn't take anything since it would put him in shambles. The major problem with his brigade was that there was no teamwork. They couldn't agree on anything without getting into an argument. The stealing incident threw things off balance, and Chef Ramsay was beginning to worry if his brigade would fall apart. At this point, the future was looking pretty bleak. With one prisoner left already, would the rest of them see Chef Ramsay's project through? Would they continue to remain disciplined and work a 9-to-5 job in the kitchen? But here comes the most challenging questions of them all. Could you trust these dangerous men with knives? Do keep a close watch on my channel, since I'm gonna reveal over the next few days whether this bakery at Brixton ever took shape or not. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, guys.